Every single spring, millions of Americans drive out to their local big box garden centers and happily hand over their hard-earned retirement money for a cart full of lies. You know exactly what I am talking about. You walk through those automatic doors, and you are immediately greeted by endless rows of pristine, blooming, neon-colored plants in little plastic pots. They look perfect. They look like a magazine cover. But what the teenage cashier and the corporate nursery managers are not telling you is that you are buying a product genetically engineered to die by October. You are buying temporary floral decorations, heavily pumped full of synthetic greenhouse steroids, designed to fail so that you have to come right back next May and open your wallet all over again. I have spent decades in the dirt as a horticulturist, and I am absolutely sick of seeing good, hard-working people treat gardening like a recurring subscription fee. It is time to stop renting your garden and start owning it. Today, I am going to walk you through the ultimate buy-it-for-life strategy. I am going to give you the 12 most indestructible, battle-tested, ironclad perennial plants on the face of the earth. These are plants that outlive us. These are plants that survive droughts, terrible soil, freezing winters, and blistering summers. I am going to break down the exact biological science of why they survive, how to plant them, and the dirty little secrets the nurseries desperately want to keep hidden from you. Before we get into the list, I want you to go down into the comments right now and tell me your state and your USDA hardiness zone. I want to see exactly what kind of climate battleground you are working with, because what I am about to teach you works whether you are freezing in Maine or baking in Texas. Let us start with the absolute ultimate drought warrior of the botanical world, yarrow, scientifically known as Achillea millefolium. When you look at yarrow, you see a gorgeous, flat-topped landing pad of vibrant yellow, pink, red, or white flowers. But when I look at yarrow, I see an absolute masterpiece of evolutionary survival. The secret to yarrow's indestructible nature lies in its basal foliage. If you look closely at the leaves, they are finely dissected, almost looking like a delicate green fern. This is not just for show. In botanical science, this physical structure dramatically reduces the surface area of the leaf that is exposed to direct sunlight, which drastically cuts down on transpiration. Transpiration is how a plant sweats and loses its internal water reserve. Because yarrow has these feathery leaves covered in microscopic hairs, it creates its own microclimate, holding on to moisture even when the summer sun is beating down at 100 degrees and it has not rained in 3 weeks. Underneath the soil, yarrow operates on a highly aggressive rhizomatous root system. Instead of just sending down one weak little root, it sends out thick, fleshy, horizontal underground stems that weave together, locking the plant into the earth and hunting down whatever trace amounts of moisture exist in the soil profile. This plant is a survivor, and it is native to some of the harshest, rockiest terrains on the continent. Now, here is the big nursery secret that garden centers will never tell you, because it loses them money. They want to sell you big bags of expensive compost, rich topsoil, and blue liquid chemical fertilizers. They want you to pamper your yarrow. If you listen to them, you will kill your plant. Yarrow actually despises rich, heavily fertilized soil. If you plant yarrow in dark, amended garden loam and hit it with nitrogen fertilizer, the plant will experience what we call explosive, weak cellular growth. The stems will grow too fast, they will become incredibly soft, and the moment a summer breeze hits them, the entire plant will flop open from the center, splitting in half and rotting from the crown down. You must starve this plant to make it strong. Give it the poorest, rockiest, leanest soil you have in full, blazing sunlight, and it will stand up straight as an arrow, punishing the heat and blooming for months. As a massive bonus, those aromatic oils running through the fern-like leaves smell wonderful to us, but they are incredibly bitter and offensive to deer and rabbits. They will not touch it. But the flat blooming heads are biologically designed as the perfect helipad for pollinating insects. You will have more butterflies and native bees in your yard than you have ever seen, all for the price of a plant you never have to water or feed. Moving on to number 2, we have the perpetual engine of the summer garden, the daylily, formerly known as hemerocallis. I am not talking about the fussy, exotic tropical lilies that require constant babying. I am talking about the rugged, bulletproof perennial that you see surviving in the middle of highway medians and abandoned farmhouses across the country. The daylily is an absolute marvel of endurance. The biological genius of this plant lies completely hidden under the dirt in its tuberous, fleshy root system. Unlike standard fibrous roots that simply pull water from the surrounding soil, a daylily root looks like a cluster of thick, swollen fingers. These tubers are biological water tanks. During the spring rains, the daylily aggressively absorbs water and stores it inside these swollen roots. When August arrives, the soil turns to dust, and every other plant in your yard is wilting and begging for the hose. The daylily simply taps into its own subterranean reservoir. It waters itself from the inside out. Now, let us talk about the flower, because the name daylily is completely literal. Every single bloom on that tall stalk, which is scientifically called a scape, opens at sunrise and dies at sunset. It lasts exactly one day. Garden centers know this sounds like a terrible deal to a novice gardener, so they try to sell you endless flats of annual petunias instead. But what the nursery manager will not explain is the biological mechanism of the daylily's blooming cycle. A single mature daylily scape does not just produce one flower, it produces a massive, staggered sequence of dozens of buds. While today's flower is dying, the plant is simultaneously pushing water and carbohydrates into tomorrow's bud, and the next days, and the next days. A well-established clump of daylilies will pump out brand new, flawless blooms every single morning for up to 6 weeks straight. It is a factory of relentless color. But to get this kind of performance, you have to understand the master horticulturist's secret of division. A daylily clump grows outward, expanding its crown year after year. By year 4 or 5, the center of the plant becomes incredibly congested, the roots start choking each other out, and flower production plummets. Do not go to the store and buy a new plant. In early spring or late fall, dig the entire clump out of the ground. Take 2 heavy garden pitchforks, plunge them back to back directly into the center of the root ball, and pull the handles apart to physically rip the clump into 4 or 5 smaller sections. Replant those sections, and you have just generated hundreds of dollars worth of free, reinvigorated plants that will outlive your mortgage. Number 3 is a plant that exposes the biggest, most profitable scam the garden industry runs every single summer. I am talking about the bleeding heart, or Dicentra spectabilis. This is the undisputed queen of the shade garden. If you have a dark corner of your yard under a massive oak tree where grass refuses to grow, the bleeding heart is your ultimate weapon. In early spring, it pushes up these gorgeous, arching, graceful stems dripping with perfectly formed, heart-shaped pink and white flowers. It looks like a delicate piece of glass artwork. It requires woodland ecology to thrive, which means it wants slightly acidic soil with a lot of decaying organic matter, like leaf mulch, mimicking a natural forest floor. It is deeply cold-hardy, thriving effortlessly down to USDA Zone 3. But here is where the big box store scam comes into play. Bleeding hearts belong to a very specific botanical category called spring ephemerals. Their entire biological programming is tied to the canopy of the trees above them. In early spring, before the big trees have fully leafed out, the bleeding heart catches the dappled sunlight, blooms aggressively, and stores massive amounts of energy in its fleshy roots. But by mid-July, when the summer heat becomes oppressive and the tree canopy plunges the garden into deep, hot shade, the bleeding heart does something that terrifies amateur gardeners. The leaves turn bright yellow, the stems completely collapse, and the plant literally vanishes from the surface of the earth. To the untrained eye, the plant is dead. It looks exactly like a plant that has succumbed to root rot or a severe fungal disease. This is exactly what the garden centers are banking on. Millions of homeowners go out into their gardens in August, see the empty, dead space where their bleeding heart used to be, assume they killed it, and immediately drive to the nursery to buy a late summer replacement plant to fill the hole. Do not fall for this trap. Your bleeding heart is not dead. It is simply undergoing a biologically programmed summer dormancy. It has shut down its top growth to conserve water and protect its crown from the brutal heat. The root system under the soil is very much alive, completely healthy, and resting. The worst thing you can possibly do is dig a hole in that spot or disturb the soil. If you simply leave it alone, ignore the empty space, and wait for the winter snows to pass, that bleeding heart will erupt from the ground next April twice as big and twice as strong as the year before. Stop letting the natural life cycle of a perennial trick you into spending more money. Let us move to number 4, the ultimate heirloom powerhouse of the botanical world, the peony, specifically Paeonia lactiflora. When we talk about buying a plant for life, we are usually talking about 10 or 15 years. When a horticulturist talks about a peony, we are talking about a plant that will literally outlive you, your children, and possibly your grandchildren. A properly planted peony has a documented lifespan of over 100 years. There are abandoned farmhouses from the 1920s that have completely collapsed into rotten wood, yet right next to the crumbling foundation, a massive peony bush still erupts with dinner plate-sized, intensely fragrant blooms every single May. The resilience of this plant is almost terrifying. The secret lies in its massive, woody, tuberous root system and its strict biological requirement for cold weather. Peonies are not for the deep south. They require a mechanism called chilling hours. In order for the plant to chemically trigger the formation of flower buds, the roots must be exposed to soil temperatures below 40 degrees Fahrenheit for several consecutive weeks during the winter. This makes them absolute champions in zones 3 through 8. But despite their legendary toughness, garden centers sell millions of bare-root peonies every fall that completely fail to bloom. People plant them, the green leaves grow beautifully every spring, but they never see a single flower. Why? Because the planting instructions on the cheap plastic bags are often vague or completely wrong. A peony root has small, red, bullet-shaped nodes on the top of the crown called eyes. These eyes are the apical meristems where next year's growth originates. There is an absolute, non-negotiable law of horticulture when planting a peony. Those red eyes must be planted exactly 1.5 to 2 inches below the soil surface. If you dig a deep hole, throw the root in, and bury those eyes 3 or 4 inches deep, the plant will grow vegetative foliage to survive, but it will biologically refuse to ever produce a flower. It will punish you for your mistake for a decade. You must plant them shallowly in rich, well-draining soil with a pH right around 6.5. And while we are talking about peony, let me destroy a myth that chemical companies use to sell you pesticides. When the peony buds are swelling in the spring, you will see dozens of ants crawling all over them. The chemical companies tell you this is an infestation and you need to spray them. That is a lie. The peony bud secretes a sweet, sugary nectar specifically designed to attract those ants. The ants act as a mercenary security force, aggressively attacking and eating any aphids or destructive caterpillars that try to damage the bud before it opens. The ants are not eating your flower, they are protecting it. Leave them alone, let nature do its job, and enjoy a plant that will anchor your garden for the next century. Number 5 is the undisputed heavyweight champion of late summer, the black-eyed Susan, botanically known as Rudbeckia fulgida. When August rolls around and 90% of your garden has surrendered to the blistering heat, turning brown and crispy, the black-eyed Susan is just getting started. It pushes up incredibly rigid, hairy stems topped with brilliant, golden yellow petals surrounding a dark chocolate center. The biological durability of this plant comes from 2 distinct features. First is its fibrous root system. While taproots go straight down, the black-eyed Susan develops an incredibly dense, tangled mat of tough fibrous roots that spread outward just below the soil surface. These roots are so aggressive and densely woven that they literally choke out competing weed seeds from germinating. They act as a living, breathing landscape fabric. Second is the anatomy of the stem and leaves. If you run your hand up the stem of a true perennial Rudbeckia, it feels like medium grit sandpaper. Those stiff, bristly hairs are an evolutionary adaptation that prevents grazing insects from chewing the stalk, and it traps a microscopic layer of stagnant air against the plant tissue, which drastically reduces moisture loss during a drought. You can plant these in heavy, compacted clay soil where absolutely nothing else will grow, and they will stubbornly carve out a living. But here is where the big box stores manipulate you. In the spring, they will line the front of the store with a cheaper variety called Rudbeckia hirta, which is often sold simply as black-eyed Susan. What they do not clearly label is that Rudbeckia hirta is technically a short-lived biennial or annual. It will bloom aggressively for one summer and then die permanently over the winter. You must check the botanical tag and ensure you are buying Rudbeckia fulgida, specifically the gold stem variety, if you want true, immortal perennial performance. Furthermore, the garden centers want to sell you expensive pruning shears and tell you to meticulously deadhead or cut off every dead flower in the fall to keep the garden looking neat. That is a terrible mistake. When a black-eyed Susan flower dies in October, the black center cone dries out and becomes packed with hundreds of highly nutritious seeds. If you leave those dead stalks standing all winter long, they become a vital, natural bird feeder. Flocks of goldfinches will descend on your garden in the dead of January, clinging to the stiff stems and eating the seeds to survive the freezing temperatures. Plus, whatever seeds fall to the ground will naturalize, giving you thousands of dollars in free volunteer plants the following spring. Stop cleaning up your fall garden so aggressively and let the plant do what it was engineered to do. Coming in at number 6, we have the ultimate general of the pollinator army, catmint, specifically the perennial powerhouse known as Nepeta phacanae. If you want your vegetable garden to produce a massive yield of tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers, you need bees. And if you want to summon every single honeybee, bumblebee, and solitary native bee within a 3-mile radius of your house, you plant catmint. This plant forms a dense, sprawling mound of incredibly aromatic, silvery gray foliage topped with thousands of soft, lavender-blue flower spikes. The science behind this plant's resilience is tied to a powerful volatile organic compound produced in its leaves called nepetolactone. This is the exact same chemical that makes domestic house cats go crazy, but in the outdoor garden, it serves a highly strategic purpose. Nepetolactone is an incredibly potent, natural insect repellent. While the blue flowers are pumping out high-quality nectar to attract beneficial pollinating bees, the chemical vapor released by the gray leaves actively repels destructive garden pests like aphids, squash bugs, and cabbage loopers. Furthermore, the aromatic oils are completely vile to deer and rabbits. They will walk right past a lush mound of catmint and look for something else to destroy. It thrives in poor, rocky soil, requires almost zero supplemental watering once established, and loves to bake in full, unyielding sun. But you will never get the maximum potential out of this plant unless you know a master horticulturist secret called the Chelsea chop. Garden centers will never teach you this because they want you to think the plant is done blooming by July, so you will buy a replacement. Here is the truth. In early summer, your catmint will put on a spectacular, massive flush of blue flowers. By mid-July, those flowers will start to turn brown, and the stems will get leggy, floppy, and look terrible. Do not panic. Take a sharp pair of head shears, grab the entire sprawling mound of the plant, and ruthlessly cut the whole thing back, leaving only about 3 or 4 inches of green stem above the soil. To a beginner, it looks like you just murdered the plant, but biologically, you have just triggered a massive hormonal response. By removing the spent flowers before they can produce seed, you force the plant to redirect its energy from reproduction back into foliar growth. Within exactly 14 days, that chopped, ugly stump will flush out with dense, perfectly shaped new silver growth. Within 3 weeks, it will push out a brand new, massive second flush of blue flowers that will carry your garden all the way until the first hard frost of November. One ruthless haircut guarantees you 5 full months of blooming power. If you are not subscribed to this channel yet, the YouTube algorithm is going to do exactly what the garden centers do. It is going to stop showing you these deep, money-saving horticultural truths, and it is going to start feeding you fast-paced, useless entertainment and sponsored videos pushing cheap plastic garden gadgets. I am giving you the exact, scientific blueprints to build a garden that outlives you and saves you thousands of dollars over the next decade. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and let us get back to the truth. Number 7 brings us to the towering, fragrant beacon of the late summer garden, garden phlox, scientifically known as Phlox paniculata. This is a plant that commands attention. It pushes up rigid, herbaceous stems 3 to 4 feet tall, capped with massive, dome-shaped clusters of vibrant pink, purple, white, or magenta flowers. But garden phlox is not just a visual masterpiece, it is a highly specialized biological feeding station. If you look closely at the individual flowers making up that massive cluster, you will see that each one is shaped like a deep, narrow trumpet. This anatomical structure is specifically evolved to exclude most beetles and short-tongued insects, reserving the rich nectar pool at the bottom exclusively for the long beaks of hummingbirds and the extended proboscis of swallowtail butterflies. Planting garden phlox is the absolute most effective way to turn your backyard into a hummingbird sanctuary. However, phlox comes with a dark side, and it is a vulnerability that the chemical pesticide industry exploits for massive profit. Garden phlox is notoriously susceptible to a fungal pathogen called powdery mildew. In midsummer, when the humidity spikes and the air becomes stagnant, the lower leaves of the phlox will suddenly become coated in a dusty, white, flour-like fungus. As the fungus spreads upward, the leaves turn brown, shrivel, and fall off, leaving you with ugly, naked stems holding up the flowers. Big box stores will happily sell you $20 bottles of toxic copper fungicides and chemical sprays to fight this, telling you that you have to spray the plant every 2 weeks for the rest of its life. That is a chemical dependency trap. The master horticulturist solves this problem for free using mechanical airflow. Powdery mildew spores absolutely cannot germinate and survive in moving air. In early spring, when your phlox pushes out its new green shoots from the soil, you will see maybe 15 or 20 weak little stems crowding each other. Do not let them all grow. Take your pruning shears and ruthlessly cut out the weakest, thinnest stems at ground level, leaving only the 5 or 6 thickest, strongest trunks spaced evenly apart. By thinning out the clump, you create natural wind tunnels through the center of the plant. The sun can penetrate the base, the summer breeze blows straight through the foliage, drying off the morning dew, and the powdery mildew spores are physically prevented from establishing a colony. You get massive, top-heavy blooms on incredibly strong stems, zero fungus, and you never have to spend a single dime on chemical sprays. Number 8 is the immortal shade weaver, the legendary hosta. If you have deep, oppressive shade under mature trees where even weeds struggle to survive, the hosta is your absolute salvation. This plant is renowned for its architectural foliage, pushing out massive, ribbed leaves that range from chartreuse yellow to deep forest green, often painted with stunning white or cream variegation. But what truly makes the hosta indestructible is its subterranean rhizome system. When you plant a hosta, it does not just sit there, it aggressively expands its fleshy, underground rhizome network, slowly increasing its footprint year after year. The biology of the hosta leaf is also fascinating. If you buy a blue hosta variety, like Halcyon, the leaves are not actually blue. The plant produces an epicuticular wax, a microscopic powdery coating that acts as a sunscreen and a water repellent. It is this wax reflecting the ambient light that creates the blue illusion. This wax also makes it incredibly difficult for airborne fungal spores to latch onto the leaf tissue. But the big box stores are hiding 2 massive secrets about hostas from you. First, they charge exorbitant prices for mature, deeply root-bound hostas in large 3-gallon plastic pots. Never buy these. When a hosta is left in a plastic pot too long, the thick roots circle the bottom in a suffocating death grip. When you plant that block into the ground, the roots refuse to spread, and the plant slowly starves over 3 years. Instead, buy bare root hostas in the spring, or better yet, find a neighbor who has a massive hosta and ask them for a chunk. Hostas are incredibly easy to divide. You simply take a sharpened landscape spade, drive it directly through the center of the crown in early spring, and physically chop the plant in half. It sounds brutal, but the plant will not even flinch. It will heal instantly and give you 2 massive plants. The second secret involves their one massive weakness: slugs. Slugs will destroy a hosta overnight, chewing ragged holes through the beautiful leaves. The garden center will try to sell you toxic slug pellets containing metaldehyde, which is highly dangerous to dogs, cats, and birds. Instead, practice smart horticulture. Slugs require a wet, decaying environment to hide in during the day. If you pull the heavy wood mulch 3 inches away from the base of the hosta stems, exposing the bare dirt, you destroy the slug's daytime habitat. Furthermore, if you select hosta varieties with thick, corrugated leaves, like Sum and Substance, the tissue is literally too tough and leathery for the slug's raspy mouthparts to chew through. Buy thick-leaved varieties, divide them mercilessly with a shovel, and never pay retail price for a shade garden again. Number 9 is the ironclad spire of the blazing sun, perennial salvia, specifically Salvia nemorosa. Now, I need to be incredibly clear here, because the naming confusion is exactly how novice gardeners waste their money. I am not talking about Salvia officinalis, the culinary sage you use to season a turkey on Thanksgiving, And I am not talking about the cheap, red annual Salvia splendens sold in 6-packs at the grocery store that dies in October. I am talking about the rugged, woody-based, deeply rooted perennial salvia that pushes up hundreds of rigid, densely packed spires of deep violet and indigo flowers. This plant is a member of the mint family, Lamiaceae, and it carries the biological hallmarks of absolute survival. If you roll the stem of a perennial salvia between your fingers, you will feel that it is perfectly square, not round. This square stem architecture gives the plant incredible tensile strength, allowing it to withstand severe thunderstorms and heavy winds without snapping. Below ground, it drives a deep taproot straight down into the subsoil, anchoring it against drought. But its true superpower lies in its photoperiodic blooming cycle and its relationship with the sun. This plant absolutely demands to be baked alive in full, southern exposure. The hotter it gets, the more intense the deep purple color becomes. Because the foliage is packed with volatile essential oils, deer, rabbits, and even grasshoppers will absolutely refuse to take a bite out of it. But here is the critical maintenance secret that determines whether your salvia looks like a professional botanical garden or a woody, ugly weed. You must master the art of the hard deadhead. When the first massive flush of purple spires begins to fade and turn brown in early July, do not just snip off the top of the flower. That is a rookie mistake that leaves you with ugly, leafless upper stalks. You must trace that dead flower stem all the way down to the base of the plant, right where you see a dense cluster of fresh, green basal foliage resting near the soil. Take your pruners and cut the stem directly above that low, green growth. By removing the entire spent stalk, you open up the center of the plant to sunlight, triggering dormant buds at the crown to explode into a second, completely fresh wave of stems and flowers. If you keep cutting it down to the basal foliage every time a flush finishes, this plant will reward you with 3 distinct blooming cycles, giving you rich, unbroken purple color from May all the way until November. Number 10 is the ultimate soil healer, the slow-burning titan of the perennial border, Baptisia, commonly known as false indigo. If there is one plant on this list that requires an absolute mindset shift away from the instant gratification garden center mentality, it is this one. Baptisia pushes up gorgeous, lupine-like spires of deep, indigo-blue flowers above a massive shrub-like mound of blue-green, clover-shaped foliage. But the magic of Baptisia happens completely invisible to the human eye, deep underground. Baptisia is a member of the Fabaceae family, which makes it a botanical legume. It possesses a highly advanced biological mechanism called nitrogen fixation. The roots of the Baptisia form a symbiotic relationship with naturally occurring rhizobium bacteria in the soil. The bacteria infect the root hairs, creating little swollen nodules. These bacteria literally pull inert nitrogen gas out of the atmosphere, convert it into a water-soluble form of ammonia, and feed it directly to the plant. In return, the plant feeds the bacteria carbohydrates. Because of this incredible self-feeding system, Baptisia does not just survive in nutrient-poor, exhausted, terrible dirt, it actively improves the soil around it. It is its own fertilizer factory. But the big box stores hate Baptisia, and you will rarely see it sold in their garden centers. Why? Because in a small, 1-gallon plastic pot, a young Baptisia looks like an incredibly awkward, unimpressive weed. It is not an impulse buy. Furthermore, the nurseries do not want to explain the strict 3-year rule of Baptisia. Horticulturists call it the sleep, creep, and leap timeline. Because Baptisia relies on an unbelievably massive, deep taproot to survive, it spends its entire first year in the ground, doing absolutely nothing above the surface. It is asleep, putting 100% of its energy into driving that taproot feet into the earth. Year 2, it creeps, putting on a little bit of foliage. But year 3, it leaps. Once that taproot is fully established, the plant erupts into a 4-foot by 4-foot shrub of absolute floral dominance. Because of this massive taproot, there is one absolute, unbreakable rule you must follow. You can never, ever move it. Once you plant a Baptisia in the ground, that is its permanent home for the next 40 years. If you try to dig it up and relocate it after its second year, you will sever the taproot, and the plant will instantly die. Choose its location carefully in full sun, walk away, and let this nitrogen-fixing powerhouse slowly build an empire in your yard. Number 11 brings us to the arid ghost of the landscape, Russian sage, scientifically known as Perovskia atroplicifolia. This plant creates an architectural masterpiece in the garden, forming a massive, airy cloud of silver-white stems and finely textured gray foliage, topped with thousands of tiny, ethereal lavender-blue flowers. It looks like a plume of purple smoke hovering above the dirt, but to understand how to grow Russian sage, you have to understand where it comes from. This plant evolved in the brutally harsh, unforgiving, arid steppes of Central Asia and Afghanistan. It is genetically programmed to survive in bone-dry, rocky, alkaline gravel where the sun is merciless and rainfall is practically a myth. The brilliant silver color of the stems and leaves is not just for our visual pleasure, it is a biological survival mechanism. The silver color physically reflects intense solar radiation away from the plant, keeping the internal tissue cool, while microscopic hairs on the stems trap a boundary layer of moisture to prevent dehydration. Russian sage is so incredibly tough that it is virtually immortal, unless you make the single most common, fatal mistake pushed by the commercial gardening industry. I call it killing with kindness. If you go to a garden center, buy a beautiful Russian sage, bring it home, dig a big hole in your rich garden bed, fill that hole with expensive black compost, and hook it up to an automatic drip irrigation system, you will murder the plant. Russian sage absolutely despises rich, fertile soil and excessive water. If you give it high levels of nitrogen and constant moisture, the plant will experience weak, floppy, unnatural growth. The silver stems will turn green and soft, the entire plant will splay open and collapse onto the ground, and the crown will rot away by September. You must treat this plant terribly if you want it to thrive. Plant it in the worst, driest, unamended dirt you have. Do not add a single ounce of fertilizer. Do not water it once it is established. Starve it, ignore it, and let it bake in the hottest corner of your property. Under those brutal conditions, the stems will harden off, turning stiff and intensely silver, holding that massive cloud of purple flowers completely upright through the worst summer heat waves imaginable. Cut it down to about 6 inches tall every spring before the new growth starts, and it will give you decades of zero-maintenance perfection. Finally, we arrive at number 12, the indestructible winter architect, the coneflower, universally known as Echinacea purpurea. The coneflower is the quintessential American native perennial. It pushes up strong, bristly stems topped with massive daisy-like flowers featuring downward-sweeping pinkish-purple petals and a prominent, spiky, orange-brown central cone. The biology of this plant is a masterclass in structural resilience. That spiky central cone is actually hundreds of individual, tiny, fertile florets packed tightly together, designed to be pollinated by a massive variety of native bees and butterflies. Under the ground, it possesses a thick, branching taproot system that easily penetrates compacted clay and allows the plant to shrug off weeks of drought without dropping a single petal. But the garden centers have absolutely ruined the reputation of the coneflower over the last 10 years, and they have done it through pure, unadulterated greed. If you walk into a nursery today, you will see a massive display of patented, genetically manipulated designer coneflowers. They come in double blooms, neon oranges, lime greens, and bizarre pom-pom shapes. They have a massive price tag on them, and they are genetically weak garbage. In the pursuit of weird, unnatural colors and mutated flower shapes, the breeders have completely stripped away the plant's natural cold hardiness and immune system. You will buy that $30 neon orange coneflower. It will look pretty for 1 month, and it will absolutely die the moment the ground freezes in winter. Even worse, those mutated double blooms physically block bees from accessing the pollen, rendering them useless to the ecosystem. Do not buy the patented designer nonsense. Stick to the classic, unmutated species, Echinacea purpurea, or proven, rugged cultivars like Magnus's. They cost half as much, and they will live forever. Furthermore, just like the black-eyed Susan, the coneflower's true value extends deep into the winter. When the pink petals fall off in October, that spiky central cone hardens into a rigid, structural seed head that looks incredible dusted in a layer of December snow. Those cones are absolutely packed with high-fat seeds that are the primary winter food source for chickadees and nuthatches. Do not cut your coneflowers down in the fall. Leave them standing tall, Let them feed the wildlife. Let them reseed themselves into your garden and enjoy the rugged, architectural beauty they provide all 12 months of the year. Now, before I let you go, I need to give you the Master Horticulturist Manifesto. If you are going to invest in these 12 indestructible perennials, you must avoid the 3 fatal mistakes that the garden industry relies on to keep you failing. Secret number 1 is the synthetic fertilizer myth. Never, ever bleed a blue liquid chemical fertilizer on a newly planted perennial. Those chemicals force the plant to push a massive amount of weak, green top growth at the exact moment the plant should be focusing 100% of its energy on growing roots down into the soil. A plant with a massive canopy and a weak root system will die in its first winter. Stick to slow release, natural compost applied only to the surface of the soil. Secret number 2 is the potting soil lie. When you dig a hole in your yard to plant one of these perennials, do not fill the hole with fluffy, expensive store-bought potting soil. If your surrounding yard is hard clay and you dig a hole and fill it with soft potting soil, you have just created an underground bathtub. When it rains, the water will rush into that soft soil. It will not be able to drain through the surrounding clay, and your plant will literally drown and rot underground. You must backfill the hole with the exact same native dirt you just dug out of it, forcing the plant's roots to adapt and push through the native soil. Secret number 3 is the watering truth. The biggest mistake novice gardeners make is standing over their plants with a hose and sprinkling them with water for 5 minutes every single day. Shallow, frequent watering trains the roots of the plant to stay right at the surface of the soil, making them incredibly vulnerable to heat and drought. You must water deeply and infrequently. When you water a new plant, leave the hose on a slow trickle at the base of the plant for 30 minutes, pushing the water 10 inches deep into the soil profile. Do this only once a week. This forces the roots to dive deep into the earth, chasing the moisture, creating an incredibly resilient, drought-proof root system. If this video saved you from making a massive, expensive mistake at the garden center this spring, I want you to hit the share button right now and send this to a neighbor or a family member who always comes home with a truckload of dead-end annuals. Let us stop the waste and start building gardens that last a lifetime. Tell me down in the comments, which of these 12 plants are you going to put in the ground this weekend? Or which one has already taken over your yard? I read every single one of them. Get out there, stop pampering your plants, and I will see you in the dirt.